This is the War Atlas for the German High Command for Operation Barbarossa. We will look at the situational map for June 21st, 1941, the day before Operation Barbarossa kicked off.
There's Army Group North. Okay, so, and that's Army Group North blown up beyond one's wildest dreams there. Wondering if we go along the deployment of forces in Army Group North, if you want to make some comments, I want to just share something. I did indeed. One of the things that I got from listening to Glantz talk about this in depth over the years was one of the points he makes about the deployment of the Panzertruppen, which here we have the 1st Panzer Division, the 8th Panzer Division. At the points where they're concentrated to break through the Soviet lines, they are numerically and in terms of firepower attacking at often 10 to 20 to 1 odds against the Soviets. So when you actually see how they break through, it's no surprise. And we're not even factoring in issues of morale, training, leadership, etc. I'm talking materially at the breakthrough points. They have overwhelming superiority, the Germans do, along the front here. But I was wondering, Craig, if you could comment about, let's start with Army Group North.
Okay. I'll just try to not get too much down in the weeds here. But of course, it was commanded by Ritter von Lieb and Field Marshal. All 3 field marshals that commanded the 3 army groups were right around 60 years of age or so. And I think he was 60, 61. He had a total of 29 divisions. In my book, Barbarossa Unleashed, the big massive tome that I published in 2014, actually made a mistake there. I said that they had 26 divisions. That is because I left off the 3 Sicherungsdivisionen, or security divisions, for rear area security. And the reason I did that is because I was using as a source the official German schematische Kriegsgliederung, the schematic organization of battle, where they had everything laid out down to individual artillery battalions that were attached to different armies, and they went army by army, and whoever the officer or officers were who put this together, they left off the 3 security divisions for Army Group North. And I remember thinking to myself, well, that's a little odd. Army Group South has 3, Army Group Center has 3. Why doesn't Army Group North have 3? Now, normally, if this were a secondary source, I would have immediately gone and checked somewhere else. Like, for example, the order of battle that David Glantz has in his book on Barbarossa. And I would have seen right there, oh, yes, there were 3 security divisions as well. You think you're using the best possible source imaginable, and some frickin' German general staff officer got it wrong. But anyway, they attacked along about a 300-kilometer front, and you are correct. All along the front, the Germans were able to establish overwhelming numerical tactical superiority at their points of penetration.
Panzer nach vorn. Sie sollen der Infanterie den Weg bahnen.
But that's hardly surprising. I mean, that's what any army that's launching an attack is going to try to do. One of the interesting things is the Air Force under LOHR, L-O-H-R, Luftflotte 1, only had about 400 aircraft. It wasn't very large. And Hoppner, who commanded the Panzer Group, of course, he too would later end up on a meat hook at Plötzensee prison after the July 20 plot. He only had 615 tanks among his 2 Panzer Corps and 3 Panzer divisions. Some 40% of his tanks were Czech. They were either the Czech 35T. I think those were, they didn't have many of those. I think they were all outfitted one division. I don't remember if it was the 7th Panzer or what Panzer division it was. And 38T, they made up about 40% of the German tanks. Now the Czechs produced a lot of good equipment, as I'm sure many of you know, but while those tanks were quite reliable mechanically, they only had a 37 millimeter gun. So they weren't going to do anything against heavier Soviet tanks. But in spite of that, and in spite of the fact that the terrain leading up from that border area, the frontier toward Leningrad and through the Baltics, a lot of it was very difficult terrain for tanks, particularly on the eastern side of that front, but they still managed to advance very quickly. In fact, von Manstein's 56th Panzer Corps, which only had one panzer division, the 8th Panzer Division, it was commanded by a very competent general. I think his name was Brandenburg. He literally had to advance 75, 80 kilometers as the crow flies on the first day of the campaign to capture a viaduct over the, I don't even know how you pronounce it, the WC River, whatever, however you pronounce that, because if the Red Army was able to blow that viaduct, the Germans would be stalled for days in that sector, and apparently that's what had happened to them in World War I. And one of the lessons learned was that they had to prevent that from happening in Barbarossa. And just as an aside, the Einsatzgruppe in that region, which I think was Einsatzgruppe A, it actually got to work, so to speak, on the second day, not the day of the invasion, on the 23rd of June, which is kind of interesting because a reviewer who reviewed that book of mine, First Day on the Eastern Front, which, if I'm kind of proud to say, won a little award from a major aggregator and book reviewer of World War II books as one of the 6 best books on World War II, and came out in 2018. He wrote a nice review, and then at the end he said, but he doesn't talk about the Einsatzgruppen, so it's a whitewash. Don't buy the book. That's what he wrote. The only problem with it was the Einsatzgruppen, which I did mention in the opening chapters, what their mission was, they weren't in action on the 22nd of June. If I had written a book about the second day on the Eastern Front and hadn't mentioned them, then maybe he would have been onto something. So it was a long, complicated process. Choice Magazine is really, really important. Any of you who know it, it's a library journal. It goes out to thousands of libraries and says either buy this book or don't buy this book. And so this was sent out to thousands of libraries. Don't buy this book because it's a whitewash. I actually contacted the professor who wrote the article, and of course he wasn't a military historian, he was a Holocaust historian, and I contacted Choice Magazine. They let me put in a retraction or a rebuttal, but as Mark Twain said, a lie is halfway around the world before the truth even has its boots on. And so that was the problem I had to deal with.
Yeah, understand. That's where you'll go into these discussions where, understandably, people will emphasize Holocaust history and don't know anything about operational history. And I was so used to people just talking about operational history for years and never mentioning Holocaust history. So that to me is where we can hopefully have a good synthesis in what we do.
Use the QR code or this link to get to our Patreon page and see our different levels of support, to get access to exclusive footage that can't be shown here. Open a free account on our website, military1945.com. If you like this kind of material, please subscribe to the channel and like the video. Thanks for watching.